If you crave the unknown, but fear the dark, then Delphi. After dawn is your sanctuary. As the first light of dawn breaks through the night, we embark on a journey into the mysteries that chill the spine. I'm your host, Jason King, and together, we'll explore the stories that lurk in the shadows. Each episode, we unravel chilling tales of unsolved crimes, police corruption, and heart-wrenching disappearances. Imagine a world where over 600,000 people vanished last year alone in the U.S., leaving behind only questions and heartache. Violent crime is on the rise, and the shadows grow longer each day. By joining us, you become a beacon for the voiceless, a light in the darkness. Together, we'll shine a light on society's darkest corners, uncovering the truths that hide in plain sight. From the eerie silence of abandoned buildings to the bustling streets where secrets are whispered, we leave no stone unturned. Tune in to Delphi After Dawn, where understanding is just a story away. Join us and let the journey begin. As we delve deeper, remember that every story has a heartbeat, a pulse that connects us all. We navigate through the labyrinth of human experience, seeking answers and shedding light on the unknown. So prepare yourself for a journey like no other, where every revelation brings us closer to the truth. Delphi. After Dawn is more than just a podcast. It's a community of seekers, united by curiosity and compassion. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time. Join us and let the journey begin anew. In the shadows of the city, where secrets are commodities and trust is a luxury, one man delves into the minds of the monstrous. Welcome to the world of Jason King, a detective with a mind as sharp as a scalpel and a heart as resilient as steel. Beneath the ordinary scenes of daily life, grim tales of notorious serial killers lurk. Each one, unique in their madness, leaves behind a chilling legacy of victims and unsolvable puzzles. But the twisted minds of these murderers never elude Jason King. With every episode, the stakes rise. Every grim detail, each hideous crime, King peels back layer by layer. In a world where evil is the norm and horror is the narrative, Jason King remains steadfast. His mission? To uncover the dark consciousness of terror. His promise? Justice. This is Jason King's world, where crime is not just confronted, but comprehended. Dive deep into the chilling tales of serial killers with Jason King.
Exclusive, the secret Gacy tapes. Never before heard conversations involving John Wayne Gacy.
The notorious serial killer discusses his crimes, his victims, and his feelings with his lawyers in the months just after his arrest. Here's Phil Rogers.
And the next thing you remember is what?
Getting up in the morning.
And you were in your room?
Yeah.
Sixth body in what room?
I think it was in the extra bedroom.
The matter-of-fact comments of a cold-blooded killer.
Did you ever have the feeling that God wouldn't care if these people were dead because they were prostitutes or having sex for money?
No, but you want to know something? I can't recall now when you're talking about religion. I can recall more than once that I wasn't afraid.
After they were dead?
But when I found them in the morning. Not pray for me, but pray for them for being such a lost soul. He's so stupid.
By now, the story of John Gacy is among the most gruesome chapters in American crime history. The Chicago contractor was convicted and executed for the murders of 33 young men and boys, most of whom were buried beneath his Northwest Side home.
So I've got 15 old school cassette tapes.
Chicago attorney Bob Motta's father, Bob Motta Sr., was co-counsel along with attorney Sam Amarante in Gacy's defense. On his 21st birthday, Motta says his father gave him this box with the admonition that someday it might be of interest.
I looked down in the box and scrawled in 2 letters or 2 words, say, Gacy Tapes.
They are chilling conversations between Gacy and his attorneys, shocking in how casually Gacy talks about the murders.
I wrestled him all the way into the front bedroom there, and while I was wrestling with him when I got stabbed. And that's what made me mad. Because I took the knife, I think I stabbed him in the chest 4 or 5 times.
That's Gacy talking about his first victim in 1972, who he always insisted he killed in self-defense.
I don't know. How do you feel? Scared. The first thing I went and did is I went to the bathroom, I think with the knife, and I washed the knife off.
All right, so then we could do what? You leave him there? You bury him
No,
right away?
we're right in front of that closet that opens to the trap into the basement. I opened up the trap and just threw him down there.
Into the crawl space?
Into the crawl space.
It would be the first of 26 bodies buried in that space. When he was first arrested in December of 1978, Gacy seemed to remember everything, even drawing this diagram of the crawl space for police showing where the bodies were buried. But just 2 months later, Motta says the tapes repeatedly show Gacy feigning ignorance to his own lawyers, now admitting just 5 of the murders.
Almost right next to where the first body was buried. In fact, it was deep because the trench was deep, and I didn't bury it all the way up level with the concrete.
How did you dig? With what utensil?
With a shovel from the garage.
How high is it?
I would think that it's about 2 feet.
Welcome to Defense Diaries.
Motta has finally found a use for the tapes, as his father predicted.
And this is Season 1, The Gacy Tapes.
Producing a new podcast, The Defense Diaries, a chilling exploration of the murders in Gacy's own words, a vivid illustration of the killer's attempts to mislead even his own lawyers.
He's had 2.5 months to sit and think about what to do in terms of forming some kind of a theory for defense in his own mind. You know, Gacy was always the smartest guy in the room, or so we thought.
6 more bodies today.
But even as he insisted he had little memory of the murders, Gacy expressed no remorse for his deeds.
Do you feel that their deaths were their fault?
Yes. There's not one of them that didn't die that I'm aware of that didn't die through their own hands or through their own wrongdoing. If you want to say that I tempted them, I put them in temptation, yes. Because understand this, everybody that came to my house, there was never a struggle, and nobody was ever forced into my house. Everybody came to my house willingly, understandingly, and knowingly what was going on.
Catch his sense of humor.
Shoelaces, huh? You're in trouble now.
Yeah, right.
Aren't you afraid sitting that close to me? What the hell? Oh, this is too long. You don't need it this long. Okay. I had a rosary, which I carried in my pocket. I've always carried a rosary. It was my communion rosary. They said, well, what kind of a knot do you use? I said, what do you mean knot? When I tie things up? I says, depending on what I'm using it for, I said, the only thing I ever learned from Boy Scouts is a tourniquet knot. He said, well, show us what that is. So I took, at that time, and again, it's together, but in order to demonstrate it here, I took the rosary and I said, well, here, you put it around. This is hard trying to do this. Why don't you put your hand out? Okay, here. What I told him, I said, here, all you do is you wrap it around, you put one knot in it. And I said, then you put a second knot in it. Okay? Mm-hmm. I said, then you take a stick and stick it in here, and you just turn this. And I said, it causes a tourniquet. I said, that's the only knot I ever learned.
Precisely the kind of knot found on the ropes wrapped around the necks of the victims found under the house on Summerdale.
Well, I'm John Gacy. I'm from Waterloo, Iowa.
And you're a man of some authority here. What is your title?
Well, I'm first cook in the kitchen, and I run the morning meal and the afternoon meal in the kitchen.
John, how long have you been here?
I've been here now a year and about 2 weeks.
Why am I asking how long do you plan to take up residence here?
Well, I hope to be getting out sometime in May.
Well, good. You're going to continue as a cook, use that as a profession?
Right. This is my profession before I came in.
All right.
Food service.
Well, now, how about Christmas time? You do anything special for the guys? What are you planning for old Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, for example?
Well, Christmas Eve, the food service department, under the direction of Mr. John Breimer, will prepare stockings that we hand out. Well, actually, they're paper bags that'll have fruit, an apple and an orange, and a box of bridge mix candy. Mm-hmm. And this is all from the staff here. They donate this. Then in the cell houses at night on Christmas Eve, we will serve cookies and hot chocolate to the men in the cell houses. This is around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. Then come Christmas Day, we serve a regular traditional Christmas dinner.
Now tell us about that. What's that going to be this year?
This is quite a meal. This will be roast whole turkey. We use 25 whole turkeys that are approximately 540 pounds of turkey that we fix. We start preparing this on the day before. This is all prepared by inmates, and there's 9 cooks under my direction and under the supervision of several supervisors that are assigned to the food area. Along with that, we'll make up 10 bake pans, large baking pans of oyster dressing. We use 8 gallons of oyster in that. And we use the giblets and everything so it doesn't go to waste, and there's a nice giblet gravy. We'll have candied sweet potatoes and use about 36 gallons of that. And so that they have a choice of potato, we make up 250 pounds of mashed potatoes to go along with it. Along with that, we'll use some 60 pounds of mixed vegetables to serve a mixed vegetable as the second vegetable on the line. We'll have 50 pounds of cranberry sauce made up. And we'll make up a Waldorf salad. And our Waldorf salad is your walnut meat, and we use fresh marshmallows, fresh green grapes, and fruit cocktail, and make up our own whipped cream topping with it. And we sometimes go through as much as 45 gallons of this on the line. The men, with the exception of the turkey, which they get a generous proportion of, and the pumpkin pie that will be served, are allowed to take as much as they want to eat. The only requirement is that you eat what you take.
Now I will tell you the story of John Wayne Gacy, also known as Pogo the Clown. John Wayne Gacy, known for his portrayal of Pogo the Clown, was a familiar face in his suburban Chicago neighborhood. He volunteered at charity events, often dressed as Pogo, bringing smiles to sick children. But beneath this facade lurked a terrifying secret. This is the story of John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown, a man whose name would forever be etched in the annals of criminal history. Born in Chicago in 1942, John Wayne Gacy's early life was marked by turmoil. His father, an alcoholic and World War I veteran, was physically and emotionally abusive. This tumultuous upbringing left Gacy with deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and a desperate need for approval. Despite his troubled childhood, Gacy showed glimpses of normalcy. He married and seemed to be building a stable life, but beneath the surface, the darkness lingered. The facade of normalcy began to crumble. In the late 1960s, when Gacy was convicted of sexually assaulting a teenage boy. This marked the beginning of his descent into depravity. Gacy's first arrest for sexual assault in 1968 should have been a wake-up call. Sentenced to 10 years, he served only 18 months due to good behavior. Upon release, Gacy moved to Norwood Park Township, a quiet suburb of Chicago. He remarried, started his own construction business, and became active in local politics. Gacy seemed to be living a normal, even exemplary life. However, beneath the surface, his dark urges were resurfacing. He began to lure young men to his house with promises of work, money, or drugs. Once inside, he would overpower them, subjecting them to unimaginable torture and abuse. The first whispers of suspicion began with the disappearance of Timothy McCoy in January 1972. Although Gacy was questioned, police initially dismissed him as a suspect. John Wayne Gacy was a man of contradictions. He craved a traditional family life, marrying twice and adopting his second wife's 2 daughters. He treated his wife and daughters with warmth and affection, creating a seemingly loving home environment. Yet, even as he embraced family life, Gacy's dark side continued to fester. He compartmentalized his life, separating his family from his gruesome secret. The man who doted on his daughters was the same man who was committing unspeakable acts of violence, just a few feet away. Gacy's Norwood Park home was a typical suburban dwelling, unremarkable, except for its owner's dark secret. The crawl space beneath the house became Gacy's killing field. He would lure his victims to this space under various pretexts, often offering them work, drugs, or alcohol. The crawl space became a macabre testament to Gacy's depravity. As the months turned into years, Gacy's killing spree escalated. He preyed on young men, often runaways or those living on the fringes of society. Gacy documented his crimes with Polaroids, capturing the terror in his victims' eyes. The crawl space beneath Gacy's house eventually became too small to contain all of his victims. He was forced to find other places to dispose of the bodies, burying some in his backyard and others in nearby rivers. Despite the mounting evidence, Gacy continued to evade justice. Despite his meticulous planning, Gacy wasn't infallible. Several times potential victims escaped his grasp, their stories dismissed or ignored by authorities. One young man, who managed to break free from his restraints, reported Gacy to the police. However, Gacy convinced them it was a case of a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. These close calls did little to deter Gacy. He continued to operate with impunity, his position in the community providing a shield against suspicion. The case that would finally bring John Wayne Gacy's reign of terror to an end began on a cold December evening in 1978. Robert Piest, a 15-year-old boy, vanished without a trace after finishing his shift at a Des Plaines pharmacy. Robert had told his coworkers about a man who had offered him a lucrative job interview at his construction company. This man was John Wayne Gacy. When Robert failed to return home, his family immediately reported him missing. The police, alerted to the fact that Robert had last been seen talking to Gacy, decided to question him. Despite Gacy's denials, the police were suspicious. They obtained a search warrant for Gacy's home, hoping to find evidence that would link him to Robert Piest's disappearance. Pause 7s. With Robert Piest's disappearance still fresh, and the police suspicious of John Wayne Gacy, detectives began to keep a close watch on his every move. As Gacy went about his day, detectives followed him everywhere, maintaining a constant, vigilant presence. Gacy, ever the cunning manipulator, quickly realized he was being tailed. Instead of trying to evade them, he confronted the detectives directly, saying, "Since you guys are going to follow me everywhere, you might as well sit with me and have dinner." Pause 5s. In an unexpected twist, the detectives found themselves sharing a meal with the man they suspected of being a serial killer. Gacy's charm was disarming, making it difficult for them to reconcile the friendly man before them with the monster they believed him to be. They had to constantly remind themselves of their mission and the grim stakes involved. Pause 5s. One particularly cold December night, Gacy, seemingly in an act of goodwill, invited the two detectives inside his home to warm up from the biting cold. They accepted his offer, stepping into the very place they hoped would yield the evidence they needed. Gacy, ever the gracious host, offered them drinks, further attempting to put them at ease. Pause 5s. As the detectives sat, one of them asked if he could use the bathroom. Gacy, maintaining his facade of hospitality, agreed without hesitation. Inside the bathroom, as the detective stood, he heard the heating system kick on. With it came a foul, unmistakable odor wafting from the vent, a smell that could only be described as the stench of death and decomposition. Pause 5s. The realization hit him with a chilling clarity. This was the break they needed. The detective knew they had to act swiftly to obtain a search warrant for Gacy's home. The facade was beginning to crack, and the true horror lurking beneath was about to be exposed. Armed with a search warrant, the police descended upon Gacy's Norwood Park home. Gacy, seemingly unfazed, greeted them with his usual charm and charisma. However, as the police searched the house, they began to uncover inconsistencies. They found a class ring belonging to John Soe, a young man who had been missing for 3 years. In the garage, they found handcuffs, ropes, and other items that raised their suspicions further. As the day wore on, a faint, sickeningly sweet odor began to permeate the house. The source of the odor seemed to be emanating from the crawl space beneath the house. The smell emanating from the crawl space was unmistakable, the pungent odor of human decomposition. Gacy, his face now pale and drawn, tried to dismiss it as a sewage problem. The police, their worst fears confirmed, ordered everyone out of the house. They called for backup, requesting a forensic team and additional officers to secure the scene. The discovery of the bodies would be a gruesome and painstaking process. The world watched in horror as the true extent of Gacy's crimes was revealed, exposing the dark underbelly of suburban America. As darkness fell, the forensic teams began the grim task of excavating the crawl space beneath Gacy's house. Floodlights illuminated the scene, casting eerie shadows as investigators carefully removed layers of dirt and debris. Skeletal remains, some wrapped in plastic, were found crammed together in a macabre jigsaw puzzle of death. 29 victims in total were unearthed from the crawl space and the surrounding property. The image of his house was forever transformed into a chilling reminder of the darkness beneath ordinary life. The discovery of the first bodies in Gacy's crawl space sent a chill down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. The sheer number of victims, the depravity of their deaths, and the realization that Gacy had been living a double life for years sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. The race was now on to identify the victims and gather enough evidence to ensure that John Wayne Gacy would never walk free again. Time was of the essence. The longer Gacy remained at large, the greater the risk that he might destroy evidence, attempt to flee, or even harm again. The police worked tirelessly, following up on every lead, interviewing potential witnesses, and meticulously documenting every piece of evidence found at the crime scene. The media frenzy surrounding the case was intense. Reporters from across the country descended upon Norwood Park, eager to report on every gruesome detail. The image of Gacy, dressed in his clown suit, became synonymous with the horrors being uncovered at his home. The public was captivated and horrified in equal measure, desperate for answers, demanding justice for the victims and their families. The pressure on the investigators was immense. They knew that the eyes of the world were upon them, watching their every move. They were determined to build an ironclad case against Gacy, one that would withstand the scrutiny of the courtroom and ensure that he would be held accountable for his heinous crimes. Under intense interrogation, confronted with the overwhelming evidence against him, John Wayne Gacy finally cracked. He confessed to the murders, providing chilling details about his crimes. He led investigators to the Des Plaines River, where he had disposed of the bodies. His confession, recorded on audio tape, was a chilling account. He spoke in a matter-of-fact tone, devoid of remorse or empathy. He claimed to have acted alone, driven by his own twisted desires. The confession provided the prosecution with the evidence they needed to secure a conviction. In a desperate attempt to escape the death penalty, Gacy's defense team decided to pursue an insanity plea. They argued that Gacy was not in control of his actions, that he was driven by an uncontrollable urge to kill. They presented him as a victim of his own fractured psyche, a man tormented by demons he could not control. Psychiatrists were called to testify, offering conflicting opinions on Gacy's mental state. Some argued that he exhibited signs of borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, conditions that could have impaired his judgment and impulse control. Others maintained that he was a calculating and manipulative psychopath who knew exactly what he was doing. The insanity plea was a risky strategy, one that rarely succeeded in cases as high profile as Gacy's. It required convincing the jury that Gacy, despite the overwhelming evidence of his premeditation and his callous disregard for human life, was not truly responsible for his actions. The prosecution, however, was ready with a counterargument. They presented evidence of Gacy's meticulous planning, his attempts to cover up his crimes, and his history of manipulating those around him. They argued that Gacy was a master manipulator, a cunning predator who used his charm and charisma to lure his victims to their deaths. The battle lines were drawn, the stage set for a legal showdown that would captivate the nation. The trial of John Wayne Gacy, which began in February 1980, was a media spectacle. Reporters and spectators from across the country flocked to the Chicago courtroom, eager to witness firsthand the legal battle that would decide the fate of one of America's most notorious serial killers. The trial was broadcast live on television, bringing the horrors of Gacy's crimes into living rooms across the nation. The prosecution, led by the determined William Kunkel, presented a methodical and damning case against Gacy. They called upon forensic experts who detailed the gruesome discoveries at Gacy's home, leaving no doubt about the brutality of the murders. They presented testimony from surviving victims who recounted their terrifying encounters with Gacy, their stories painting a chilling picture of his methods and his cruelty. The defense, led by the experienced Sam Amarante, faced an uphill battle. They attempted to discredit the prosecution's witnesses, highlighting inconsistencies in their testimonies and suggesting that Gacy had been coerced into confessing. They clung to the insanity plea, arguing that Gacy's actions, though horrific, were the result of a mental illness that rendered him incapable of controlling his impulses. The courtroom became a battleground of legal strategy, expert testimony, and emotional appeals. The jury, tasked with deciding Gacy's fate, listened intently to both sides, their faces etched with the weight of their responsibility. The world watched and waited, holding its breath as the trial unfolded, the outcome far from certain. After 6 weeks of grueling testimony, the jury reached a verdict. John Wayne Gacy was found guilty on all 33 counts of murder. The courtroom erupted in gasps and sobs as the verdict was read. Gacy's crimes were too horrific, his attempts to plead insanity too transparent. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence that left no doubt about Gacy's guilt. The verdict brought a sense of relief, but not closure, to the families of the victims. The trial exposed the dark underbelly of suburban America. Gacy pale and expressionless, showed no remorse as the verdict was read. The man who had once been a friendly face at children's parties was now a convicted serial killer. Following the guilty verdict, the trial entered the sentencing phase. The prosecution argued for the death penalty. The defense pleaded for leniency. The jury deliberated for 2 days. On March 13th, 1980, John Wayne Gacy was sentenced to death. Gacy, emotionless, was escorted from the courtroom. He spent 14 years on death row. The killer clown was finally brought to justice. John Wayne Gacy entered Illinois' death row at Menard Correctional Center, his life as he knew it over. No more community gatherings, no more children's parties, no more hiding behind the mask of normalcy. The man who craved attention was now known only by a number: 99973. Confined to a small cell for 23 hours a day, Gacy's days became a monotonous routine. He began painting clowns and self-portraits, selling them to collectors. He granted interviews, proclaiming his innocence, blaming his victims. He remained a source of fascination and revulsion, synonymous with the dark side of human nature. Gacy's death sentence triggered a lengthy appeals process, a common occurrence in capital punishment cases. His lawyers, citing various legal grounds, filed numerous appeals challenging his conviction and sentence. They argued that he had received inadequate legal representation, that evidence had been mishandled, and that his mental state at the time of the crimes had not been properly considered. The appeals process dragged on for years, each legal challenge meticulously reviewed by higher courts. Gacy, meanwhile, remained incarcerated on death row, his execution date repeatedly postponed, as his case wound its way through the labyrinthine legal system. Anti-death penalty activists rallied to Gacy's cause, arguing that capital punishment was cruel and unusual, regardless of the severity of the crime. They held vigils, wrote letters, and organized protests, demanding that Gacy's sentence be commuted to life in prison. The families of Gacy's victims, however, found little solace in the legal wrangle. They endured years of agonizing uncertainty. The pain of their loss, compounded by the repeated delays and the constant reminders of Gacy's crimes, splashed across the media. They attended countless hearings, their faces etched with grief and anger, their voices growing louder as they demanded justice for their loved ones. As the years turned into over a decade, Gacy's appeals were exhausted. The Supreme Court declined to hear his case, and the governor of Illinois refused to grant clemency. The execution date was set, May 10th, 1994. In the days leading up to his execution, Gacy was granted special privileges. He was allowed contact visits with family members who gathered at the prison to say their final goodbyes. He ordered a last meal of fried chicken, French fries, fried shrimp, and a strawberry milkshake, a final indulgence for a man who had shown no mercy to his victims. Reporters gathered outside the prison, their cameras flashing as they documented the arrival of witnesses and the heightened security measures. Anti-death penalty protesters held a candlelight vigil, their chants of "Stop the execution" echoing through the night air. Inside the prison, Gacy met with his spiritual advisor, a Catholic priest who had been visiting him regularly on death row. He wrote a final statement, proclaiming his innocence and expressing regret for the pain his crimes had caused. He also penned a letter to his family, urging them to remember him not for his crimes, but for the good times they had shared. As the hour of his execution approached, Gacy was escorted to the execution chamber, a sterile room dominated by a gurney, and the tubes and needles used for lethal injection. He was strapped to the gurney, his body tense, as the execution team prepared the lethal cocktail of drugs. At 12:58 a.m. on May 10th, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was pronounced dead. The execution marked the end of a life that had brought unimaginable pain and suffering to so many. News of Gacy's death spread quickly, met with a mixture of relief, anger, and a sense of closure. For the families of his victims, it was a bittersweet victory. For many, Gacy's death brought a sense of finality, a closing of a dark chapter in American history. The execution of John Wayne Gacy in 1994 did little to quell the terror his crimes had imprinted on America. The image of the killer clown lingered, a chilling reminder that monsters could lurk beneath the most unassuming facades. His victims, many of whom remained unidentified, became tragic symbols of vulnerability and the desperate need for vigilance. Gacy's case, with its sheer brutality and the shocking revelation of his double life, sent ripples through law enforcement agencies nationwide. It underscored the importance of thorough investigations, especially in cases involving missing young men who often slipped through the cracks of the system. The case highlighted the need for better communication between jurisdictions and a more proactive approach to connecting the dots when individuals disappeared. The impact on criminal profiling was undeniable. Gacy became a textbook example of a psychopathic personality, a master manipulator capable of concealing his true nature behind a charming facade. His case emphasized the need for behavioral analysis, the importance of recognizing warning signs, and the understanding that evil could wear a friendly face. The families of the victims lived with the aftermath, their grief compounded by the constant media attention and the haunting knowledge of their loved ones' suffering. They became advocates for victims' rights, their voices amplifying the call for justice and the need to prevent such tragedies from happening again. The world grappled to comprehend the depths of Gacy's depravity. How could a seemingly ordinary man, a husband, a father, a community volunteer, commit such horrific acts? The search for answers led to a deeper exploration of psychopathy, a personality disorder characterized by a lack of empathy, remorse, and a disregard for social norms. Experts pointed to Gacy's troubled childhood, his abusive father, and his own feelings of inadequacy as potential contributing factors. They highlighted his need for control, his thirst for power, and his twisted desire to inflict pain as hallmarks of his psychopathy. His case became a grim reminder that evil is not always easily identifiable, that it can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal individuals. The image of Gacy dressed as Pogo the Clown, a figure meant to bring joy to children, became a chilling symbol of this duality, a stark representation of the deceptive nature of evil. The study of Gacy's crimes and his psychological profile helped to advance the field of criminal profiling, providing valuable insights into the minds of serial killers and the motivations that drive them. His case emphasized the need for early intervention, the importance of recognizing and addressing personality disorders, and the societal responsibility to protect the vulnerable from those who seek to exploit and harm them. Gacy's therapist, Dr. Helen Morrison, took a unique approach to understanding his mind. She preserved Gacy's brain in a jar, hoping to uncover the reasons behind his monstrous actions. To this day, she continues to study his brain, seeking answers to the dark mysteries of why serial killers commit such heinous crimes. The execution of John Wayne Gacy brought a sense of closure to a horrific chapter in American history. The legal system had run its course. Great justice, albeit delayed, had been served. However, Gacy's death also ignited a debate about the morality and effectiveness of capital punishment. Opponents of the death penalty argued that it was a barbaric practice, a form of revenge that did nothing to address the root causes of crime or offer true justice to victims. They argued that life imprisonment without the possibility of parole was a more humane and effective punishment, one that allowed for reflection, rehabilitation, and the potential for individuals to come to terms with their crimes. Proponents of capital punishment argued that it was a just punishment for the most heinous crimes, a deterrent that sent a clear message that society would not tolerate such acts. They argued that it provided a sense of closure to victims' families, allowing them to move forward, knowing that the person responsible for their loved one's death had been held accountable. The debate over the death penalty, reignited by Gacy's execution, continues to this day, a complex and multifaceted issue with no easy answers. Gacy's case, however, serves as a stark reminder of the human capacity for both unimaginable cruelty and the enduring search for justice. Even decades later, the echoes of John Wayne Gacy's crimes still reverberate. His Norwood Park home, a place of unimaginable suffering, was demolished. The land transformed into a memorial garden. The memories linger, kept alive by families, investigators, and a society grappling with the dark side of human nature. True crime documentaries, books, and podcasts continue to revisit the Gacy case, each iteration attempting to make sense of the senseless. The legacy of John Wayne Gacy serves as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance, empathy, in a shadowy underworld of crime, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary. You've been journeying with me, Jason King. We've dissected the minds of some of the most notorious serial killers, peeling back the layers of their darkest secrets. Every shadowy corner we've turned, every chilling confession we've analyzed, has been a step deeper into the abyss. But remember, the abyss also gazes back. So, brace yourself as we prepare to dive even deeper. Next time, we'll unravel a tale so twisted It will make your spine tingle with anticipation. An enigma so intricate, it will have you questioning everything you thought you knew. Until then, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp. This is Jason King, signing off.